Well, good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 138 of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where today, well, we're going to let Frodo rest and recuperate for another week before we wake him up.
And we'll step into the common room here in just a moment. But first, I'm Shawn Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the Man of the West, who would much rather be waking up in the House of Elrond, even if he had a splinter of metal in his shoulder, Alan Sisto.
That is a high price, but that can only mean that once again, though, we're going to be answering some more unscripted Q&A for you here today, folks. Now, we have a few of our patrons online with us here, and by few, I do mean a few, actually, today, but only a few. In the common room, we've asked them to come with some of their very best questions. As always, we have no idea what they're going to ask us, so Shawn and I are going to be answering questions on the fly in our 8th Questions After Nightfall episode.
And our first of the new season. And as always, we're looking forward to the quarterly event where it is our guests' business to ask questions, and it's our business to answer them.
And as with previous Questions After Nightfall episodes, aside from any possible edits for nervous coughs or time spent flipping through pages while we look for an answer, we'll be presenting this as it was recorded live. Everything you hear in this show will have been recorded during this session.
And if you'd like to get in on the next one, go check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/prancingponypod. We'll be doing Questions After Nightfall episodes every quarter, and we'll be inviting patrons at the Elrond's honorarium tier and higher to join us.
That's just one of the many ways we're saying thank you to our patrons, giving them the opportunity to get to know us a little better, make us laugh, stump us, and occasionally, or more than occasionally, embarrass us in the best possible way. Along the way, we'll be referencing as many books as we can to back up our answers. We've each got a few of our ebooks on the computers here with us.
Well, I've even got a few physical books in the booth with me, so I don't get caught off guard.
Show off.
Yeah, you know, I'm surrounded by paperbacks, and
it's a library.
It is. Well, since we get a lot of questions from listeners about our sources, we want you all to remember that all the books we've mentioned on the show are linked in our show notes to each episode, and this episode will be no exception to that. And they're also on the official library page of our website, theprancingponypodcast.com.
And there's a lot of other stuff on our website, too. Show notes, book links specific to each episode, hilarious outtakes, or maybe less than hilarious, depending on your opinion. Prancing Pony
There's a couple of hilarious ones. The rest of them are
some pretty funny ones.
Yeah.
I think objectively speaking, there are at least 3 or 4 out of the 100 or so. And of course, there's the Prancing Pony Ponderings and a few other little extras. But now, why don't we go ahead and introduce our guests? I'm going to unmute each of you so that you can say hi to your fellow podcast listeners. Let them know your first name and where you're joining us from tonight.
Hi, this is Demay. I'm from Fairbanks, Alaska, where it is a beautiful fall day.
Beautiful. Fairbanks, cool. Alaska. I wonder what we should have an Alaska moot. That'd be a lot of fun.
That would be lovely. Right now, I'm in Texas at the beginning of September, and Alaska sounds great right now.
Doesn't it? All right. Next up.
Hi, this is Jim from Maryland, right near Annapolis, north of the Naval Academy, where it's also been a beautiful day, though a little hot.
Oh, nice. Well, good to have you with us, by the way, and I understand it's your first time with us. I don't think we've had you here before, so thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jim.
And next.
This is Arthur from just outside Baltimore, Maryland, where we've been having a cold snap. It only got up to about 85 today.
Oh, you have my sympathies.
Yeah.
And finally.
Nice.
I'm Daniel. I used to be from Texas, but now I'm from Seattle, where we're having a hot snap, and it's only gotten up to 85 today.
All right.
Wow. And you're getting there right at the start of the rainy season, aren't you?
Yeah, I think we have about another month, so that should be nice.
Okay. That will be a nice break.
Fantastic. Enjoy it.
Well, as you've noticed, folks, we do have a slightly smaller crowd than usual, and we do miss all the folks who RSVP'd, various reasons they weren't able to join us tonight, but that means we're going to probably get some really good questions as people get to dig deep into their long lists of things they want to ask Alan and Shawn.
Very intimate group here tonight, and
indeed.
We're looking forward to it. Almost a conspiracy.
Almost a conspiracy, indeed. So who are we starting with tonight, Shawn?
We are starting with Demay.
All right. Demay, go ahead.
Okay, well, I have been rereading the Silmarillion. It's probably been 2, maybe 3 years since I've read it, and I've been really hung up on the Ainulindale. Hopefully I said that correctly. It's just Ainulindale. Yeah, it's just such a pretty piece of writing that I've probably read it 6 times, and I said, you have to move on. But I do have a question, a little bit of word nerdery to start with here.
Okay.
The Ainur are referred to as brethren in the book. Are they all male to start with? Now, Tolkien was so deliberate in his word choices, I cannot believe that if he had some way of explaining male and female in one collective term, he would have done so. So I'm wondering, is there another collective term? Were they all male to start with? Now, one of the things I was thinking about just today, as I did my long 3-minute commute to work, was that he does talk about men using the capital M, and that covers both males and females of the mankind.
Right.
Maybe that's what he was talking about, but I don't think it was capitalized.
Brethren certainly wasn't capitalized. You're right. Yeah.
No.
That's a good question. I mean, I'm thinking of later on in the Ainulindale where it says...
Well, they were male and female from the beginning, right?
Exactly. It says, when they desire to clothe themselves, the Valar take upon them forms, some as of male and some as of female. For that difference of temper they had even from their beginning.
Right.
Right. And it is but bodied forth in the choice of each, not made by the choice, even as with us male and female may be shown by the raiment, but is not made thereby. So I think his intention is that there were male and female from the very beginning. They were created some male and some female. As for why he uses the word brethren, I think he's just using a collective noun there. I don't know much about the history of the word brethren and, whether it's been used as a collective for groups including males and females before. But I do know that, when I think of some other non-gendered nouns that we might use, something like siblings is a much later word, at least with that meaning. The word sibling is actually pretty old in English, but it had a different meaning once upon a time. It didn't mean brother or sister originally. So maybe that wasn't, maybe that didn't feel right for Tolkien because it didn't have that meaning in the archaic style of English that he was going for. I think it is intended as a collective to include both female and male.
Yeah, I was going to land at the same place. And I think if we look at the way, again, we often talk about how Ainulindale in particular seems to echo biblical language. I know that in the New Testament, there are a lot of occurrences of the word brethren or brothers. I believe the Greek is adelphoi. And it's intended to refer to the collective brothers and sisters, that belong to the church. So it may be that same kind of concept that it is intended to be used as a gender neutral collective here. That certainly seems to be the point that Tolkien's making, since we do get the idea that they are male and female, that they had those identities from the very beginning. That would be my conclusion as well. Demay, do you have any follow-ups or any thoughts on that?
Not a follow-up, but I kind of landed in the same thing there. I didn't have time because I was at work and couldn't really look anything up. But it seems like to me that Tolkien being so specific and wanting to use language that's appropriate for the mood he's trying to set, that I agree with Shawn on the sibling kind of thing, that maybe brethren is just an older term and is inclusive.
Yeah. I think that's it. I'm just looking, I can't get onto the OED online that quickly, but I'm looking at Etym Online, the online etymology dictionary, which is a little bit easier to get into quickly. And it doesn't say much about brethren. It just says, alternative plural of brother, predominant circa 1200 to 1600s, now surviving only in religious usage. So that kind of goes to what you were saying, Alan, about the, the biblical feel of it. But I think that's all it is. I think it's a collective. And I think it is male and female.
And of course, it indicates a family relationship like siblings would have as well. So that also makes sense.
Thank you.
No problem.
The thing I always wonder, and I'm just going to digress a little bit here. The thing I always wonder is if they are all brethren, what does that mean when we get things like how Melkor and Manwë were brothers? That's something I've never really come up with
That's a very interesting point. You're right, because they were brethren in the mind of Iluvatar. They were the two.
Manwë was the brother of Melkor in the mind of Iluvatar. Yeah, exactly. That's the language. And, we get things like Irmo and Namu.
But you know what? If we go with brethren as being that collective, the idea is not a sibling relationship. I mean, if I'm thinking, and again, I know I'm thinking of this in the Greek context because I'm thinking of it biblically, and I don't want to exclusively go down that track, but if we use that adelphoi language, that's meant to be the whole of the brothers and sisters, even if it just means a brethren. So in that case, there's still brothers or sibling groups within the brethren as a whole.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's an interesting choice, though.
It is an interesting choice, and that's come up as a question sometimes, not on the show, but I've seen it out there online, and I don't know. I don't have an answer for it, but it's something that I think about. So there you go.
A glimpse into the mind of Shawn Marchese.
Oh, it's a terrifying place.
Hello. All right. And I don't remember. Do we have Art next or Jim?
It's Jim next.
All right. Well, Jim, welcome to the show. What do you have for us tonight?
Sorry, I'm just taking a little bit to recover from glimpsing into the mind of Shawn Marchese.
It takes a while. Yeah.
It may be a very long time.
Yeah.
My wife will tell you it's taken decades.
Well, I'm very glad to talk to you guys in person again. Saw you guys at Mythmoot 5.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I was a guy. I had auctioned off a suit of chainmail that I made back when I was in college.
Right.
With wire pilfered from my father's wire company, and also was wearing the Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra T-shirt.
Yeah, that's what I remember. That Corey, phenomenal shirt right there.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, I have a number of questions, but I'll put one out there, which
one at a time is a good place to start.
Yeah. Well, as I go further through middle age and I become more aware of financial matters, I come across passages in here where I have to think to myself, why didn't these people avail themselves of certain opportunities that came their way? For instance, the Barrow-wight. 4 hobbits, they lost all of their possessions, but then Tom Bombadil pulls out all this treasure, ancient treasure, which he says the purpose is he wants to disperse it so that the spell of the Barrow will be broken and no wight will come and inhabit it again. This particularly is poignant when you look just about a chapter later, and when we were talking about Strider, and Frodo is afraid that he's fallen in with a rascal, and he thought uncomfortably they only brought a little money with them. All of it would hardly satisfy a rogue, and he could not spare any of it. So why in the dickens did they not help themselves to more of the Barrow-wights?
Yeah, why did they take a little more treasure? Could you take it a little bit more?
They took a few swords, but and by golly, that was a good move. It turned out very handy later on.
Yes, it turned out to be quite good.
But I mean, be a little more self-interested. Be like Bilbo. I mean, he took 2 chest baggins, came back with the dragon treasure. Then he took half of the troll treasure afterwards. He wasn't shy about. All
I can think of is 2 chests.
Yeah, so.
I'm sorry.
2 chest baggins.
2 chest
So anyway,
baggins,
what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Why
never asked
why
about
wasn't he
the
a little more
dragon?
practical?
They always ask about the chests.
They always ask about the chest. That's a very good question, Jim. I actually like that a lot. It's a nice speculatory question that we can't really answer. Did I just speculatory is not a word, is it, Shawn?
It is now.
It is now because I made it that way. Dang it!
That's right. If we can make spabimmy a word, we can make speculatory a word.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, I'm looking for.
I mean,
I'm looking for Tom's language on that because it is. He
Tom
basically
took
did you find it?
Took the brooch set. Right, he took the brooch set with the blue stones and had that memory. And he had said then after that, he bade them lie free there, free to all finders, birds, beasts, elves or men, and all kindly creatures. For so the spell of the mound should be broken and scattered, and no wight ever come back to it. All finders, birds, beasts, elves or men, and kindly creatures would presumably include 4 hobbits. I mean, they're relatively kindly.
I mean, he did. He said birds, beasts, elves, or men. He didn't say hobbits. So maybe the hobbits are just sitting there with their hands in their pockets, like, well, he didn't say us.
Well,
I don't know.
It's not us. Also, there may be a little bit of this. My thought is, if I'm Merry or Pippin or Frodo or Sam, and I've just gotten out of there with not even my clothes, the last thing I'm going to want is to take some treasure from this barrow. Like, get that away from me. I'm not even sure I want that knife. But okay, Tom, if you give it to me, I'll take it. There might be a little of that. And also just the practicality. I don't know that any of them think economically minded. I mean,
you got to think that it would at least cross Merry or Pippin's mind.
Yeah, you'd think it would. You're right.
You got to think.
I mean, Frodo doesn't think about it because he just has all the money in the world. And I mean, he comes from money.
Except that Bilbo spent it all, right?
That's true. Bilbo did spend it all. I'm just thinking he's a man of means, a man of leisure.
Well, that's true. And Merry and Pippin are as well.
They're pretty much aristocrats like we talked about. Sam, of course, being a poor working man. I don't know. Why wouldn't they take something? Well, presumably, maybe. Let's see if there are any coins. Does he actually talk about coins? I don't think so. He just talks about treasures. So we've got a brooch, and we've got the daggers, and let's see, what else do we have?
He just says it's a pile that glistered and sparkled on the grass.
Maybe there wasn't any cash, and it wasn't practical for them to take the treasure and try to, convert it at the local bank to whatever currency was being used in the area.
They could grab like a diamond necklace or something, put that on. They'd be able to sell that for something.
Well, this isn't D&D. There's not a merchant on every corner who's willing to pay
That's true.
the going rate.
That is true.
I mean, that's the thing. Who's going to buy it in Bree? I mean, Bartleman's probably the only one with any real means to purchase treasure. So maybe it just, there was no really, what's the word I'm looking for? No fungible treasure, nothing that they could just turn into usable resources. Art has possibly a comment or answer for us on this. What do you think?
Well, I am remembering, and I think it comes a couple of chapters later, where they run into they find the trolls and find the old troll catch, and they asked what happened to that, and says Bilbo gave it away.
Yes.
He didn't think he should have it because it came from thieves.
Yes.
Right. And what's worse than a thief? A barrowite.
Well, that would be.
Yeah,
that's a very good point.
That's exactly what I was thinking as you started talking, Arthur. So yeah, you must have sent that to me telepathically as you started talking. Yeah, Bilbo gave, and I found it. Bilbo gave it all away.
Don't let him start sending stuff to you telepathically. You'll never get him to stop. Puns will just come through nonstop.
And I would love it every moment. No, Bilbo gave it all away. He told me he did not feel it was really his, as it came from robbers.
Right,
and I think that's really it. I think Tolkien is really trying to show his heroes not influenced by greed.
Yeah, I think so. It maybe falls in line with what I was talking about them not being creeped out by the white and by the barrows and thinking the last thing I want is something from these guys, just like I wouldn't want anything that came from thieves. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. There's probably an element of like, hey, this treasure's haunted. I'm not sure I want to take this with me.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I think
good
that's
stuff.
it.
That was some good insight, Arthur. Thank you.
Had to be some sort of a moral decision.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, folks, it looks like we've had one more person join us tonight.
Hello, I'm Bruce, and I'm from East San Gabriel Valley, and I'm glad to join you tonight.
Well, we're glad you could join us too, Bruce. Thanks so much. We'll get you in after Daniel's questions, so we'll come back to you in just a little bit.
All right.
All right. Well, Arthur, thank you for that great insight. And now it's your turn to ask a question. What do you have for us tonight? Only one at a time.
Okay, I'm not going to ask the question about why Sauron refers to Shelob as his cat. Obviously, he misses his old friend Tevildo. That's not what I'm going to ask.
Yep.
The question I have, it's kind of a multi-layered thing because this is something I brought up and I've been really puzzled by the responses. It's almost like people don't like the answer that's obvious. And it has to do with the Elrond family. If I could just for a moment pull from the appendices where it talks about the children of Elrond, it said to the children of Elrond, choice was also appointed to pass with him from the circles of the world, or if they remain, to become mortal.
Mm-hmm.
And we know, obviously, that Arwen said, I'm staying here, bye, Dad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But then we also see in the prologue, there's a brief mention that Celeborn, after he finally got to be the man of the house for a few hundred years, after everyone else sailed off, he goes to Rivendell and stays with the sons of Elrond.
Right.
And every time I bring this up as proof that the sons of Elrond also became mortal, with the implication that they're sitting here saying, well, Arwen looks like great-grandma. Arwen is the Betsy Ross of Gondor. Arwen became mortal. It's Arwen. What about us? But every time I bring it up, people will say things like, well, there really is not exactly when Elrond leaves. There's probably 50 or 100 years leeway time, or people seem to be obsessed with Arwen being the only one who becomes mortal. When the way I read it, there's no way to read it other than when Elrond steps foot on the boat, that's it. And I just kind of wanted to get some thoughts about where you guys came down on this and just why it is maybe it's because everybody wants to be Arwen to be so unique, but why it is that it's so difficult to get people to say that the sons of Elrond also renounced elvishness and became mortal.
Mm-hmm. I have an image of Eladon and Elrohir being like Jan Brady, and like it's always Arwen.
Exactly.
Marsha. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, good question. I don't know. I feel like I think we might have even talked about this one before, maybe on Facebook at some point, Arthur.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I guess the reason why all the attention is paid to Arwen and why nobody notices the Sons of Elrond making that choice if they did in fact make the choice to be mortal and stay. I guess the reason nobody notices that is because it's such a big deal with Arwen. And when Tolkien, it seems as though that choice is almost always bound up with a marriage, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's always Luthien choosing to stay with Beren.
Right.
It's always Eärendil and Elwing choosing to be immortal together. It's Arwen choosing to be with Aragorn. We don't hear anything about Eladon and Elrohir if they had girlfriends that they stayed behind for or anything like that. And maybe that's why. Maybe people just assume that, oh, well, it's Tolkien. He's only going to have an elf make that choice when they're staying behind for somebody. And maybe that's why people assume that they didn't make the choice to be mortal. But I agree with you. I based on what it says in the prologue, it does sound like they did stay behind, unless they stayed behind for a while and then
that's what I'm thinking.
Took another ship later on. But doesn't it say something about Celeborn taking the last ship?
It does.
Yeah,
it mentions.
go ahead.
Celeborn.
It says that Celeborn, when he went, he took with him the last living memory of the elder days, which also implies that the ship he was on was built out of Treebeard, but that's a different discussion. But the concept that there was a grace period, first of all, at the end of the tale of Aragorn and Arwen, he says to her as he's lying there getting ready to get all mummified and everything, that repent. And she says, no, that choice was made long ago. There is no ship that will now bear me hence. It's irreversible.
Right.
And and I don't read it as irreversible because, well, she ran off with a dude. It's irreversible because the Valar said either you go with your father or you don't go with your father.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and there was also
okay. That's why you're okay. All right.
There was also a poem in the Tales of the I think with the collection, the Tom Bombadil collection, where it talks about a girl who there's a ship sailing and she says, no, I can't go.
And it's the only chance.
The implication to me is it's a done deal. And there's no saving roll, if I could use that metaphor.
Roll a 12 on your D20 and you'll still get to take a ship.
I also note, by the way, that we were talking about Elvish women and men, I suppose is the phrase. Men. But there was also Tuor and Idril, that he decided to become an elf. He was given the choice. He decided to join, even though he loved his family. It's the only time it worked in the other direction, as far as we know.
Right. Well,
I think
I have to say, I'm not sure I land on, and I know I'm ready to get hammered by both you and Art on this one. I'm not sure that I land that they, I mean, if they had to go with Elrond, then they must have stayed and become mortal. But that's not how I'm seeing this at the end of the prologue, that Elrond departed, his sons long remained together with some of the high elven folk. So they're there as sort of the remnants of the Noldor. But the problem is there's no specificity given in the next sentence. It's only talking about Celeborn. There's no record of the day when at last he sought the Grey Havens, and then the last living memory of the Elder Days.
And to be fair, last living memory of the Elder Days, remember, Elder Days means the first age. And
and
Eladon and Elrohir would not have memories
age.
of the first age.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So, playing devil's advocate, last living memory of the Elder Days doesn't.
That certainly doesn't rule out Eladon and Elrohir remaining immortal and going back later.
Yeah.
Now, if it had been that they were still there when Celeborn took the last boat, then we have another story. But
what about Legolas and Gimli? When did they leave?
That they left quite late, if I remember correctly. I'm going to have to go to.
I don't know where the timeline is on that.
I know where that is. Yeah, here we go. It is at the end of Appendix A, the very end of Appendix A. We have heard tell that Legolas took Gimli, Glóin's son, with him because of their great friendship, greater than any that has been between elf and dwarf. And this includes Tauriel and Keely. If this is true, then it is strange indeed that a dwarf should be willing to leave Middle-earth for any love, or that the Eldar should receive him, or that the Lords of the West should permit it. But it is said that Gimli went also out of desire to see again the beauty of Galadriel, and it may be that she, being mighty among the Eldar, obtained this grace for him. More cannot be said of this matter. So there's nothing about
when that happened.
Right.
It was after Aragorn's death, though, wasn't it?
Oh yeah.
And it would have been after. I'm assuming it would have been after Arwen's death as well,
which was the very next year, if I remember correctly. Right?
Yeah.
Didn't she lay herself down to die on Cairn Amroth that following winter?
That sounds right. Yeah.
And then so Frodo and Sam would have gone back, or Frodo would have gone back. Sorry, Frodo and Bilbo would have gone back. I think even before Gimli and Legolas.
Oh yeah. If Frodo, you mean Sam? Sam would have gone.
Sam would have gone much later, of course. Not later necessarily than Gimli and Legolas, but later than Frodo and Bilbo, of course.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking Legolas and Gimli might be the last ones to go, except for maybe Celeborn.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm just guessing. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's inconclusive, but the fact that nothing is mentioned and the fact that Elladan and Elrohir do stick around for a long time leads me to believe that there's a very good chance that they made the decision to be mortal as well. And maybe it just wasn't significant because, maybe they didn't have kids. Presumably they didn't have kids.
Yeah.
But it's just, we can't know for sure. But I think, if I were to go back to your original question, Arthur, why do people have a hard time believing that? Probably because Tolkien he makes such a great story about most of the times when this happens. And so it does seem kind of strange that he would allow it to happen, or he would have it happen in the story and not make a big deal about it in Elladan and Elrohir's case. So maybe that's why people think they just remained elves. I don't know. I can kind of go either way.
Okay. There's one more thing that might be useful in the Field of Cormallen, which is chapter 4 of book 6. Legolas says that he's going to walk in the woods of this fair land. He's talking about Ithilien. And he says that if my elven lord allows, some of our folk shall remove hither. And when we come, it shall be blessed for a while. For a while, a month of life, 100 years of men. So if we take that as literal, then for 100 years, there would have been elves dwelling in Ithilien, and then they would have up and left. So it would be about 100 years later when Legolas and Gimli would have then left. That's maybe a way to get a date, which would make that, a little after Fourth Age 100, I guess Fourth Age, I don't know, 110, 120 maybe. I don't know. Well, Jim, it looks like you have some solutions for this one. What do you have for us?
Well, a couple things. As far as Samwise was concerned, in 1482 Shire Reckoning, Mistress Rose died, and then Samwise went with Elnor to the Tower Hills, and she watched him go off to the Grey Havens after he gave her the Red Book. And the tradition was that he sailed over the sea, blasted the ring bearers, and joined those across the sea. And then as far as Legolas was concerned, he stayed presumably in the woods of Ithilien with the other elves who had settled there until the death of King Elessar, which was in 1541 Shire Reckoning. That's 120, 120 Fourth Age. And then he built a great ship and sailed, and tradition said that Gimli the dwarf went with him. So
so we have an actual date in the Tale of Years. We just didn't know where to look.
So it was about 100 and
that's 120
years. Yeah, after
Fourth Age 120.
the War of the Ring. Yep.
Thank you, Jim. Really appreciate that. See, it's good to have listeners that are paying attention.
Yeah, and I think Arwen left the next year. Was that right? I think, or
Arwen died the next year.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was autumn, I believe, that he died. Arwen.
No, it was March. Wasn't it March 1st? Didn't we just?
Was it March 1st? Okay.
Shoot, now I don't remember.
I'm gonna look for that again.
March 1st, right. The passing of King Elessar.
My mistake. Okay, I had already forgotten that. So March 1st.
How soon we forget, right?
March 1st, Aragorn died, and then at last, when the Malorn leaves were falling, but spring had not yet come, right after his death. So spring had not come again since Aragorn died. Arwen laid herself to rest upon Cairn Amroth. That's why I got my wires crossed.
So sometime in the
bucketed.
winter of the year later, sometime less than a year.
Right, exactly. Yep.
Okay.
It is less than a year later. So we're looking at 1542 of the Shire Reckoning. So
right.
Fourth Age 121. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's when, and that was also, so that would have been when Legolas and Gimli left some point before
they would have left
she
right
died.
After,
right before she died. Yep.
My goodness.
But again, that still says nothing about when exactly Celeborn left or any of that.
Or whether Elladan and Elro here left with him, left on a different boat, or didn't leave at all.
Celeborn was gone. When Arwen went back, when Arwen went back to Lorien, Celeborn was already gone. Right. So he was either in Rivendell or he had already sailed.
Right. Do we know when Celeborn went? We don't really know because there's no record of the day when at last he sought the Havens.
Right. So he may have been in Rivendell. He may have already sailed.
Yeah. I'm going to guess that he was in Rivendell for a while. I mean, they were there with some of the High Elven folk. So these are probably some of the last of the Noldor. But we don't know. It could have been before.
Yeah.
It could have been before.
I could go either way. I really could. I could go either way on Elladan and Elro here. I mean, it is interesting that Tolkien doesn't say anything about it when he does usually like to make a big deal about these things. But the fact that they stayed as long as they did, it does. And the fact that they tended to associate with the Dunedain a lot, didn't they?
Oh, they absolutely did. Yeah.
And so maybe there's something there too. Maybe they would have thrown their lot in with men. Maybe they would have considered themselves more like men and made that choice.
That's an interesting speculation. I'm sure we'll talk more
speculation,
about it.
Though.
Oh, yeah, pure speculation. There is nothing in the text to give us a firm answer, but we certainly enjoy speculating. That's some good stuff. Well, next up, I think we've got Daniel, right, Shawn?
That's right.
All right, Daniel, what do you have for us tonight?
All right, so it's time to challenge long-held beliefs.
Uh-oh. Is this about Balrog wings?
Not quite. It's about Fëanor.
Oh, no. We got a Fëanor apologist in the house.
No, we actually don't. Okay. So, Fëanor, definitely a villain.
Right.
But I see that as a tragedy. Do you think that's a proper reading? Could you talk about that some?
Sure, I think we can. Any chance we get to whip out that old pinata, we're happy to do so. I what do you think, Shawn? That's definitely a tragedy. I mean, it's a fall from grace. It's the bigger they are, the harder they fall.
Tolkien loves a fall, and as I'm looking at the text of chapter 11 of the Silmarillion, what's that thing called? The Silmarillion. It says, I had it, and I lost it.
I think I know which line you're talking about the Valar and how they mourned not more for the death of the trees.
They mourned not more for the death of the trees than for the marring of Fëanor. Of the works of Melkor, one of the most evil.
Yeah.
For Fëanor was made the mightiest in all parts of body and mind, in valor, in endurance, in beauty, in understanding, in skill, all that good stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely think, it's a fall, for sure. He didn't start out evil. He started out... No. He started out kind of a jerk. Even Melkor didn't
start out evil, remember?
No, that's true.
I mean, that's the whole thing. I mean,
he started out an arrogant jerk.
Choices. Oh, yeah.
But no, he didn't start out evil. And I do think it's tragic. I do. And I think that's what makes it an interesting story.
I think so, too.
It's more fun to point out how arrogant he is. But no, it's definitely a tragedy. Yeah.
Well, we talk about Turin being a tragedy, and Turin's a tragedy because of the decisions he makes. Mm-hmm. Now, in his case, many of those decisions, you could argue, are made under the influence of a curse. But there's still decisions that he made. And it's the same thing with Fëanor. Fëanor has this fall, and it is a tragic fall, and it's tragic because of the decisions he makes.
Mm-hmm.
Do I wish he didn't fall? Yeah. Wouldn't it have been interesting to find out what it would have been like with an unfallen Fëanor? That chapter that you were reading from, chapter 11, goes on to say, the works of wonder for the glory of Arda that he might otherwise have wrought, only Manwë might in some measure conceive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no doubt. Total tragedy. It would have been far better for everyone involved if he hadn't fallen, particularly the Teleri. But it's,
it's a classic tragic case. I mean, we're talking
it really
about
is.
we're talking about a case of hubris, overmode, whatever you want to call it.
Overmode, right.
Here's a character with a serious tragic flaw. Here's a character who starts out with everything and who has this character flaw that just leads him to make the wrong decisions. And yeah, he falls. Definitely tragic. Part of why I think it's less tragic than Turin, at least for me as a reader, is because Fëanor isn't as human. I know back in season 1, I think we talked about, this story works because Fëanor is so human. These are human flaws. And it's true, they are.
They are human flaws, but
Fëanor is still superhuman. He's still the skill that he starts out with, and the
mightiest of all of the elves ever born, of all the children of Iluvatar. Yeah.
Right, exactly. He's born Superman, and he's
really
not
is.
quite as human from the beginning, whereas Turin is more human, and I think it resonates more with me as a mortal. I haven't talked to any elves who've read this story and which one resonates more with them. But
well, I'm sure the Teleri would have something to say about that.
Probably, yeah.
Speaking of people who have something to say about that, Arthur, you've got a comment, right?
I was thinking, think of how great it would have been if Fëanor had stayed in school and kept his nose to the grindstone and everything. On the other hand, as the Valar would point out, if not for that, what things would not have happened? You would not have had Gondolin.
Yeah.
You would not have, the stupid dog would never have come over to Middle-earth. All that stuff would never have happened.
The stupid dog.
As Fëanor's grandmother would say, everything happens for the best. It couldn't be any better. Poo, poo, poo.
Oh my goodness. It's great stuff.
It's true. There'd be no sun and moon if it weren't for the mistakes of Fëanor.
And again, we go right back to that passage you were quoting. Manwë himself says that dear bought these songs will be accounted, and yet shall be well bought, for the price could be no other. Thus, even as Eru spoke to us, shall beauty not before conceived be brought into Ea, and evil yet be good to have been.
Yep.
So, yeah, you're right. All those amazing things that happened because of the exile of the Noldor wouldn't have happened. Of course. Yeah. From a story perspective, I think we've always tried to make this clear. Fëanor was necessary. It was good that he was made into a villain who would make these choices.
You can't have a story without a villain.
Tale. Yeah. But right, exactly. Especially this tale. You can't have, Tolkien concerned himself with the fall, with a few other things. Mortality and the machine, I think, were the other two things that he talked about. But the fall was a big one. And here we've got the fall in its classic form, really in an echo of Melkor. As we've talked about before, Fëanor sort of being that mini-me of Melkor in terms of pride and some of the same sins of Melkor that we've talked about.
Yeah.
So definite tragedy, but at the same time, a necessary tragedy and a beautiful tragedy because of all the results. So absolutely. Great question, Daniel.
And I think that's one thing that if we ever do what we say we're going to do, and we go back and revisit the Silmarillion someday, I think that's something that we can probably do a better job of getting across. I think early on, we had very strong opinions about Fëanor.
We still do, but
we still do. Yeah. And I think
they're nuanced now. They're a little more nuanced.
A little bit more nuanced now. And I think we could do more to talk about, the immensity of that tragedy. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Bruce, now that you're here, let's go ahead and get a question from you. What do you have for us?
I was just going to switch up on questions here because I have two set up. However, listening to Dr. Olson's podcast several months ago, he kind of cut short the whole conversation of boulders in the Bruinen. And I think people were very disappointed that there was going to be no more talk of the loud stones that were rolling down in the floodwaters with the white horses and the figures.
Okay.
It took 14 days for Gandalf to get to Rivendell through the Enten Moors. Could he have been gathering spell components to put in the Bruinen to make these loud boulders to be a material component and thus destroy the wraiths by a powerful positive influence a spell in addition to the White Riders, in addition to the foam and the horses. Just wanted to bring boulders up again, just for the sake of it.
All right. Shawn, I'm going to go ahead and pull up that passage. Let me read the paragraph that he's referring to. And I have to admit, because I'm still behind, so I have not heard his discussion on this. So this is all going to be speaking from our perspective, and I'm not going to be able to recap what Professor Olson has said. But here's the paragraph. This is right after the leader raised up his hand. Frodo's stricken dumb. His sword breaks. At that moment, there came a roaring and a rushing. This is the moment that the black horses got to the shore. At that moment, there came a roaring and a rushing, a noise of loud waters rolling many stones. Dimly, Frodo saw the river below him rise, and down along its course there came a plumed cavalry of waves. White flames seemed to Frodo to flicker on their crests, and he half fancied that he saw amid the water white riders upon white horses with frothing manes. And then, of course, the riders are overwhelmed, they disappeared, and the rest drew back. Shawn, talk about that a little bit while I take some time to look up what Gandalf says about that in the next chapter, okay?
I've already got it right here.
Oh, good. You are reading my mind.
Let me read that, and then we can talk about it.
Yes, perfect.
So Frodo asks, who made the flood? And Gandalf answers, Elrond commanded it. The river of this valley is under his power, and it will rise in anger when he has great need to bar the ford. As soon as the captain of the Ringwraiths rode into the water, the flood was released. If I may say so, I added a few touches of my own. You may not have noticed, but some of the waves took the form of great white horses with shining white riders, and there were many rolling and grinding boulders. For a moment I was afraid that we had let loose too fierce a wrath, and the flood would get out of hand and wash you all away. There is great vigor in the waters that come down from the snows of the Misty Mountains. So
there we go.
The horses, specifically the waves that looked like horses and the boulders, were Gandalf's work.
And what's interesting is there he specifically describes the boulders. In the initial section, there was thought in my mind that perhaps that was a metaphor, but that paragraph eliminates that likelihood, because if you listen to the actual way that's described, at that moment there came a roaring and a rushing, a noise of loud waters rolling many stones. That could be a simile. Like it sounded like loud waters rolling many stones.
Like just a rumbling sound.
A rumbling sound. But what you just read certainly makes it clear there were boulders.
There are literal boulders.
That's a nice boulder. Sorry, that's my Shrek reference for the night. I like that boulder. That's a nice boulder.
Oh, man.
Sorry.
Yeah. I haven't seen that movie in so long. Man,
that's a hilarious film.
Ever since I watched
hilarious.
Shrek. First one was great.
Yeah, I don't know about the other ones. Anyway, we digress, even in our Q&A episodes.
We got to.
So what about the boulders? Clearly they were real. They were there. And it sounds as though that was one of the touches of Gandalf. I added a few touches of my own, the waves taking the form of great horses, and there were many rolling and grinding boulders. I don't know about spell components and all that. He's a wizard. He's mighty powerful. And his command at this point is not to reveal that power to anybody, but he could have done that privately, quietly. Nobody
he can nudge things a little bit, especially if Elrond is already doing something and Gandalf is just sort of embellishing.
Right. All he's doing is adding a little bit of stuff over the top. Yeah.
Right.
That's exactly right. All I did was give the boulder a little nudge out of the door. Right.
Yeah, I think this is well within the limits that are set upon him by the Valar. It's like I didn't reveal my power. I just made them look like horses. Just added some boulders.
This isn't Gandalf uncloaked.
Although it is interesting that he says, for a moment I was afraid that we had let loose too fierce a wrath. Like he put a little bit too much juice on it. Like Elrond already put some power behind it. Elrond kind of leaned on the gas pedal a little bit and a little too much.
Elrond's like, I got this, Gandalf. You do not need to do anything.
Right.
What are you doing, man? You didn't need to add the rocks.
Right.
I am glad, though, that he didn't say there were many grinding and rolling stones. That would have been too funny.
Yeah. Yeah, it would.
So,
especially after we named all of our episodes on that chapter after Rolling Stone songs.
I know. And yet here it was in the next chapter where he actually mentions it. So,
yeah.
Good question, Bruce. Well, now we get a second round, though that's probably all we're going to get. Looking at the time, we're probably halfway through. So one more question for everybody, possibly more if they're short. Well, Art is first in the second round. Go ahead. What do you have for us?
Well, I'm not going to ask about how the editors missed the typo in Gandalf's speech to the mouth of Sauron, where he referred to Sauron as the base master of treachery when the original manuscript clearly called him the bass master.
We're not going there. There you go. I love the questions you don't ask us. I really do. Those are great questions you don't ask.
Those are actually harder to come up with sometimes.
They are.
And they still stay in our minds so that we will be thinking about this in a few years when we get to that part.
You've set a high bar. You've really set a high bar, yeah.
Well, thank you. The question I do want to explore, and again, this is one I've asked in other venues, and the answer I've never been really satisfied.
We're doomed.
Part 1.
All right.
Captain Witchy and his peace patrol, the Nazgul, are what we used to call back in the 70s gnarly dudes. These are bad guys. Even 2,000 years ago, they crushed Minas Ithil. They crushed Arthedain. These are bad dudes. Jumping to the Council of Elrond for a moment, Elrond says that there was power to resist the enemy in the Havens and in Rivendell and in Lorien, and there's power of another sort to resist him in the Shire. Right. Doesn't say anything about Minas Tirith or Rohan or anything. Those are the specific places where there's the ability to resist Sauron.
Right.
And we note that when the Nazgul encounters the Gaffer, the Nazgul backs down from the Gaffer. And when the Nazgul come to the house in Crickhollow, they knock on the door and ask for them to open the door. What kind of Nazgul are these? The question I have asked is, what is it about the Shire that makes these supernatural bad guys relatively powerless? Some people, I posed this to Corey, who quoted a specialist whose name escapes me, unfortunately, who said, oh, well, their power is weakened in areas of civilization. Well, Bree is civilized. Minas Ithil was very civilized. Minas Tirith was civilized, and the Witch King knocked the door down and walked in, and everybody fled in terror.
Right.
What is it about the Shire? That, somebody in the chat is asking about whether the Nazgul are following vampire rules and they have to be invited in first. I'm not sure about that.
I don't think so.
I would certainly look forward to any thought or discussion on the question of what is it about the Shire where there's a power to resist the enemy of a different sort.
Okay, that is a good question. Shawn, I think I have to start because I think we've either had similar questions asked before or we've touched on this indirectly, but I think a lot of what we see with the Nazgul in the Shire is that they're operating under a different set of rules at that point, or a different, not so much different set of rules. They have a different mission at that point. Their mission is recon. Their mission is to find the ring bearer as opposed to capturing the ring bearer. And as a result, their fear isn't turned up to 11. They're not in that same mode that they are in later when they attack the inn at Bree, for instance, or the mode that they were in previously when they took over Minas Morgul or Minas Ithil and turned it into Minas Morgul.
Or later when they attack Minas Tirith. Yeah, those are times when they have the terror turned up to 11. They're in battle mode at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And
here they're not there
in
yet.
that mode here. I think we go back to, and I have to look at my very specific notes on this, so I don't know that I can find them right away. But the manuscript, the Marquette manuscript that Hammond and Skull reference in that chapter of the Reader's Companion, where there's a lot of notes from Tolkien sort of explaining the motives, explaining the whys of what the Nazgul are doing, what the Witch King and his cohorts are up to. And I do seem to recall that specifically they were essentially to keep quiet. They were essentially to kind of be stealthy in their approach, and that a violent approach wasn't going to be the answer. And I don't know if that's going to be a satisfactory answer, Arthur. But maybe Shawn has some other insight about something that is truly specific to the Shire. I mean, there is obviously something specific to the Shire. Elrond says as much. I'm just not sure that that's what we see in play in those moments. I don't know if that's why they back down from Farmer Maggot, or that's why they ask to open the door at Crickhollow. But clearly Elrond is saying there is a power of a different sort.
Yeah, and the fact that he says a power of a different sort, I think, is more significant than it looks. I think. And while I'm saying this, Alan, you might want to take a look at Hunt for the Ring, because I think there is something in there about the limitations that Sauron had put on the Nazgul.
Yeah, I'll pull that up
when they were in the Shire.
Yeah. Okay.
But one thing that that has occurred to me over the course of the last season when we were reading book 1 was the idea that the hobbits are protected from a lot of the danger of the Nazgul because they simply, it's like I don't know why this works, but it seems as though just their rustic nature and their lack of interest in the outside world and their lack of knowledge of the outside world kind of protects them to a degree. And maybe
naivete does. Naivete is protective. That's true.
Yeah. And I think there's an element of they don't know just how dangerous it is. They don't know just how dangerous the Black Riders are. No. Clearly, if Maggot or the Gaffer had an idea of just who they were talking to, they would not talk to them the way they do. And maybe there's power in that. Maybe it's not just
I can see
an ignorance of the danger they're in that kind of leads them to make these choices that the Nazgul are like, did that guy just say what I think he said to me? But I think there might be something more to it than that. Maybe there is some power in that.
Maybe.
I don't know how. I don't know why. But I do secretly believe that the hobbits were secretly bred by Iluvatar in sort of like a Bene Gesserit breeding program to create the ultimate
Kwisatz Haderach.
Yeah, the Kwisatz Hobbit Rock. And they're like, I think they're bred to be resistant to Sauron and all of Sauron's minions. I think that's why hobbits are there.
Right.
I think that they've arisen to be the weapon against Sauron, and maybe there's something in that. I don't know that I have proof of it, but that is definitely the impression that I got from reading book 1 as we did season 3.
I think so.
Did you find anything in Unfinished
I did
Tales?
find something in The Hunt for the Ring. This is a note of Christopher's. He says that in version B, it is noted that the Black Captain did not know whether the ring was still in the Shire, that he had to find out. The Shire was too large for a violent onslaught, such as he had made on the Stewars. He must use as much stealth and as little terror as he could, and yet also guard the eastern borders. Therefore, he sent some of the riders into the Shire with orders to disperse while traversing it. So they were given orders to use much stealth and little terror. So I think that's why we didn't see anything in play during that time. Now, obviously, there is still that strength that Elrond references. And I think you're hitting something there in the sense that it has to do with their rustic simplicity, their naivete, their lack of knowledge of the outside world, and their lack of motivation of interests in power and things like that. I mean, with some exceptions. I mean, clearly Lotho is the exception that proves the rule. But for the most part, hobbits don't really care about the happenings of outsiders and don't want to be involved in outsiders, and they're not interested in the power that might come from allying with those outsiders. But I do think that there are more things in that manuscript from Marquette that give us even more clues about why we don't see any incidents in the Shire, particularly, in terms of the investigation, the search for the ring itself by the Black Captain and his crew.
And that's more along the lines of just the ringwraiths themselves making a decision not to turn up the power to 11 and the terror to 11. Yeah,
absolutely. So now we do, it looks like, have some questions on this one. Jim, did you have a follow-up on this, or is your hand up for your next question? I forget.
Well, hands up for the next question, but I couldn't help but say that I'd always thought in later times that it was an ideal circumstance, which sadly the captains of the West didn't take advantage of, to have the 9 ringwraiths come so far from their power base and leave themselves vulnerable to attack, rather than just driving them into the river and having them be beaten down by the waters. Could they have, say, made arrowheads tipped with the blades that they found in the barrow? and elves are really good with arrows, and just get a crowd of them there. Once they're all at the water's edge, they all pop out of the bush and say surprise, and then shoot them full of arrow blades and wipe out 9 nostrils.
It does seem like a huge missed opportunity.
Yeah. So, but of course, they didn't know until quite late that they were on their way.
Well, that's the thing, right? Couldn't exactly set up that ambush. No, that's an interesting idea.
They've had a few thousand years to get ready for it, but no, that was what I was going to say. My hand was actually up for my turn next.
All right, Jim, what's your next question for us tonight?
Well, I have a question from book 1 or a question from book 5. Which would you like?
Flip a coin, or Shawn, why don't you pick?
I figure book 1.
We covered one. We might actually be able to answer that one with some.
Yeah.
Let's do book 1.
Yeah.
Well, thinking about the old forest and the fact that it used to be part of the same general woods as Fangorn,
Yeah.
I think they would have benefited from the presence of few Ents. And I wonder why the Ents abandoned the old forest, let it go, because it is obviously a very ancient forest, and Fangorn knew something of it. Why didn't they tend that as well as they tended the Fangorn forest? And then maybe it'd still be a place of dread for civilized people to go into, but it wouldn't be so overtly evil and hostile to all things that walk on two legs. Yeah, and especially when and I was thinking about the fact that they said that the trees in earlier times had attacked the hedge, and if they had been anything like the Huorns from the Battle of Helm's Deep, then they would have done a lot more than a little hedge trimming. I can tell you that.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
That would have been a real problem. That's a good question, Shawn. What do you think on this one? I mean, we certainly don't know the time frame. It may have just been a matter of numbers, huh? I mean, if there aren't enough Ents to cover that kind of ground, and the Ents sort of retreated as the forest retreated, and that one little cutoff, that one little section that stayed, there just weren't any there. That's kind of my first thought.
My first thought is that what became Fangorn was sort of the heart of Entdom.
Yes, and I think that's represented by the fact that the moot is held there.
Yeah,
the Ent moot in that dell in that bowl.
Yeah, exactly. And so maybe just as the forest in the middle got depleted and the two forests got separated, maybe they did just retreat further and further south. That's the only explanation I can come up with, unless it has something to do with Old Man Willow. I kind of wonder if there might be something to do with that.
Well, it may be, and I think maybe he might have at some point been an actual Ent. I'm going to go to a part of Fangorn, or of Chapter 4, Treebeard in Book 3. And he's talking, and I'm not going to try to do his voice. Pippin asks him about
we'll be here all night.
Trees. And Treebeard says, that's right. He says, the trees and the Ents. I do not understand all that goes on myself, so I cannot explain it to you. Some of us are still true Ents and lively enough in our fashion, but many are growing sleepy, going tree-ish, as you might say. Most of the trees are just trees, of course, but many are half awake. Some are quite wide awake, and a few are, getting Entish. That is going on all the time. When that happens to a tree, you find that some have bad hearts, nothing to do with their wood. And he goes on to talk about that. I think that may be what we're seeing here, is that any Ents that were there went tree-ish, and that instead the Old Man Willow is getting Entish. And we found that he has a bad heart, that he is like these dangerous trees that Fangorn's talking about in Fangorn Forest. So that would be
that very well could be.
Yeah.
That very well could be. Maybe it's not
especially
that they
retreated.
Isolation. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It may not be that they retreated south into Fangorn, but because Fangorn was sort of the center of Entdom, as they got separated from that, any Ents and Huorns that were in the old forest, just became tree-ish, and other trees started becoming more Entish, like Old Man Willow.
Without any influence. Yeah.
I think that's a solid answer.
Oh, well, there you go. Broken clock twice a day, man. That was a good question. All right, Daniel, I understand you have one more for us.
Yeah. So just on the last question, one thought that I had was I guess it's important to keep in mind that not all characters in the story police their lands as much as we might want them to, like Tom Bombadil. But also, the Ents didn't even really take care of their own forest until after Merry and Pippin came. But anyway, on my own question, you did mention Balrog wings. And so about them, this might not make much sense to anybody who hasn't read Roverandom, which is a great read. I fully recommend it. But what if the Balrog in the films didn't originally have wings, but for dramatic effect, borrowed wings from the Man in the Moon for the film, and the wings are back in the Man in the Moon's pocket now?
You're right. That wouldn't make much sense to anybody who hadn't read Roverandom.
And that's why he didn't know how to use them, and why he plummeted to his death.
Yeah, that could be it.
They were just for show.
They were good enough for dogs, but Balrogs are a little heavier.
Yeah,
that's true.
Right, exactly.
It's all that shadow and flame.
Yep.
It has been so long since I've read Rover Random. It took me a while to dig those references out of my memory banks, and I fear that most of our audience probably hasn't read it. I think that's probably one of the less read works. I mean, I'm hoping we remedy that when we get to season 9, but
they should read it though.
Oh, I agree. They should absolutely.
It's good for being a little dog centric. It's good.
What? Oh, well, you'll notice he didn't write a book, about cats. Just saying.
I know.
Yeah. The Fauna of Mordor.
I replace dog with cat every time I read. Of
course you do. Of course you do. Did I ever mention that Huon's probably my favorite character in the whole of the Legendarium? I just want you to know that. If you can still be my friend, we're good.
You have mentioned that once or twice.
Who's a good dog?
I do miss Tevildo.
I miss Tevildo because that would have been absolutely hilarious podcast fodder. Are you kidding me?
Oh, yeah. Huon versus Tevildo?
Absolutely brilliant.
Yep.
Well, let's see. Who do we have next? We have, I believe,
next
Bruce.
Next up, we've got Bruce. Yep.
All right. I have 2 questions, but one will have to wait to the number 9, questions after Nightfall.
All right.
I just received my book, hardback edition, Baron and Luthien, yesterday, and I'm very happy. I just cracked it open, looked at one of Alan Lee's stupefying pictures in the inside.
Amazing work.
And it happened to be of Huon, by the way.
Of course.
There is a great picture of Tevildo in there, too.
Yeah, but he's chasing a red dot on the wall.
Very, very good. Darien, the minstrel of Thingol, lives in exile for ages and ages. Mm-hmm. Did he happen to make it to modern times and influence great artists and poets such as, say, J.R.R. Tolkien or Khalil Gibran or perhaps Rush?
Or maybe Elvish has left the building.
Oh, man.
Oh. Sorry, had to. What do you think, Shawn? I'll let you talk on that one.
I don't know. It's never occurred to me before. I do believe that Maglor is Brian Wilson. So it's possible. But when I think of, what happens to Maglor, singing in pain and regret beside the waves.
Well,
that's
Pet Brian
Sounds.
Wilson. That absolutely is. You're right.
That is Pet Sounds all over. So I definitely think Maglor is Brian Wilson. So could Dairon be somebody else? Yeah, it's possible.
Maybe.
Certainly possible.
God only knows where I'd be without you. Is that what you're talking about? That's Maglor?
That's one of them, yeah, for sure. And he's talking about his brothers.
Yeah. What song off Pet Sounds would you think he'd be singing?
So for me, I think it would be, and I guess this one is a little bit more obscure, but I just wasn't made for these times because he wasn't.
Oh, you're right. You're not going to sing that for us, though?
Oh, man. Do I?
No, it's all right. I was giving you a hard time.
I guess I just wasn't made for these times. There you go.
There's some sorrow right there, but that's more just because you can't sing.
Indeed. I tried to give you an out. You
did try to give me an out, and I absolutely subjected our listeners to your singing anyway. That's because I care. So I think we have time for a couple of more quick questions, but probably only 2 or 3 more relatively quick ones. So first off, DeMay, you haven't gotten a chance in the second round here. Do you have another one for us?
Oh, yes, I do.
Of course you do. All right, fire away.
Actually, I have 2. They're both from the Ainu Lindale. Did I get it better this time? I don't have it written out in front of me, so...
think about it this way. Ainu, like Ainur, right? Ainu Lindale, which is the song of the Ainur. Ainu Lindale.
Right. Ainu Lindale.
Oh, that sounded great.
Okay, good. One is about Nienna, and one is about Manwë. Which do you want?
Shawn, I'll let you pick this time.
I think I'm up for a Nienna question.
First, I need to do a disclaimer. I have always really adored Nienna.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And one time back when I was teaching Lord of the Rings to middle school kids, those are kids between the ages of 10 and, say, 14.
In other words, the worst of humanity, depending on...
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All I can say, guys, is be ready. You've got little kids coming up.
Shush, yeah.
Okay.
Be here before we know it.
Yeah, there was someone with a costume at an Oxenmoot of Nienna, and my students all fell in love with the photo of her. And so Nienna, she's awesome in my eyes. However,
oh yeah,
however, Varda built the stars, Ulmo built the sea, Aule built the land,
right?
Yavanna built the living things, and so on and so on. What did Nienna do? She weeps, and then she enters Arda. I know that pity, grief, solace, and so on are really important for people to be aware of. But did she build anything? I mean, what did she do?
What did she do? What have you done for me lately?
Exactly.
I have some thoughts on that I think we touched on early in season 1, Shawn. Do you think you know where I'm going on this, right? It has to do with the themes, the themes of the music. I want to read from Ainulindalë. This is after Melkor's discord has begun, and we have coming up. We're approaching the third theme. Then again, Iluvatar arose, and the Ainur perceived that his countenance was stern, and he lifted up his right hand, and behold, a third theme grew amid the confusion, and it was unlike the others. For it seemed at first soft and sweet, a mere rippling of gentle sounds, delicate melodies. But it could not be quenched, and it took to itself power and profundity. And it seemed at last that there were two musics progressing at one time before the seat of Iluvatar, and they were utterly at variance. The one was deep and wide and beautiful, but slow and blended with an immeasurable sorrow, from which its beauty chiefly came. So we get that. And I think that's really important to kind of hold on to that and then go to the Valaquenta, where we learn a little bit more specifically about Nienna. Mightier than Este is Nienna, sister of the Fëanor. She dwells alone. Anybody who cries as much as she does is probably going to dwell alone. We've gone over that. I mean, when her Tinder picture is her bawling, you're going to swipe the other way. I'm just saying. But so she's acquainted with grief, and I'm sorry, I like Nienna too. So she mourns for every. I know, and I'm sorry. I just have to poke fun every now and then. She mourns for every wound that Arda has suffered in the marring of Melkor. Now here's where we get a tie into that previous passage. So great was her sorrow as the music unfolded, that her song turned to lamentation long before its end, and the sound of mourning was woven into the themes of the world before it began. I think her part, and we're not told specifically, but her part there was creating that third theme, was being an integral part of that third theme. And as we know, or as we've talked about on the show, it's the third theme that the children of Iluvatar come from. That's the stuff that the rest of the Ainur, or the rest of the Valar had no idea about. So I think in a way, her music shaped who the children of Iluvatar were when they were brought into being by Iluvatar. What do you think, Shawn?
Yeah, no, I think you're on the right track there. I think that if she was not, I don't know that she was the only one of the Ainur responsible for that theme, but I think that thread of sorrow that's woven, I think that's definitely her leading, because
that's where the beauty of that theme came from.
Right.
That's the point, is
right.
The goodness, the beauty of the children of Iluvatar. What makes the children of Iluvatar so beautiful is what Nienna did.
And because the language in Valaquenta that talks about the sound of mourning was woven into the themes of the world, that's so similar to the language in Ainulindalë.
Exactly.
That has to be Nienna there.
It does.
The only thing that I would add to that, to say, what kind of beauty, or what specifically do the children of Iluvatar get from Nienna? I think it's the next sentence in Valaquenta where it says, "She does not weep for herself, and those who hearken to her learn pity and endurance in hope." I want to linger on that endurance in hope, because remember, she is the sister of Irmo, Lorien, and Namo, Mandos. And yes, going back to what we discussed earlier in the episode, what does that mean that they're sister and brothers? We don't really know, but obviously there's a close relationship between those three. And remember that Lorien and Mandos are called the Fëanor, which means it means something like masters of spirits. Mm-hmm. Has to do with Fëa, the word for spirit or soul.
The Fëanor,
and although
right.
Nienna is not specifically called one of the Fëanturi, obviously she is also very closely related to these two brothers who have power over the human spirit. So let's look at the power that Mandos and Lorien have over the human spirit, and the Elvish spirit too, I guess.
For that card. Yeah.
So Mandos is the summoner of the spirits of the slain. He's all about what happens to us after we die, and in the case of elves. Well,
no, you're right. The men stop there too. It's the last bus stop. Right. Yeah.
Exactly. Both men and elves make a stop in Mandos before,
and quite possibly
men go
dwarves
on.
As well. Quite possibly, it is said. Yeah.
Right. So Mandos is all about what happens to us after we die. Lorien is all about dreams and visions, the things that inspire us while we're alive. And I wonder if Nienna might be somewhere in the middle with this endurance and hope. And I think what she has built is she's built hope. She's given hope to men and elves so that we can keep on going, because we are in this fallen world, and because Melkor has wrought this corruption on the world. We need hope, and we get that hope from Nienna. I think without Nienna, we would not have the hope to go on, frankly, to go on living in a world that's, in a world that's fallen. Yeah. I don't mean for that to sound quite as bleak as it came out, but you know what I mean? I mean, I think it's...
No, of course.
I think that's what it is. I think that's what she gives us. She gives us that hope that we need to carry on. And I think she's very closely tied to the human spirit and the Elvish spirit.
Absolutely. And, I think I was answering your question in the context of what did she do in the beginning with these others, the creation powers, right? You talked about Aule creating the ground, the earth itself, and Manwë with the airs, and Varda with the stars, and, what did Nienna make? I do want to point out also, and thanks to Jim for giving us a reminder on this, but things that she did later were important too. I think about the fact that when the trees were killed by Ungoliant and Melkor, Manwë asked Yavanna and Nienna to put forth all their powers of growth and healing. And I'm quoting here from chapter 11 of The Sun and Moon. And they put forth all their powers upon the trees, but the tears of Nienna availed not to heal their mortal wounds. And for a long while, Yavanna sang alone in the shadows. Yet even as hope failed and her song faltered, Telperion bore at last upon a leafless bough one great flower of silver, and Laurelin a single fruit of gold. Those, of course, would go on to become the sun and moon. So she's also created the sun and moon, at least in part, with Yavanna. So that's worth mentioning as well. Demay, it looks like you have a quick follow-up on that before we move on. Go ahead.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about the Hobbit spirits and how they could stand up against something as severe as the ring wraiths.
Right.
I'm kind of now thinking I need to look a little more deeply into the spirit of the Hobbit and how that might be related to Nienna. And is this something that she really focused on these little people whenever they started to appear, that she gave them that intestinal fortitude, for lack of a better word, and to carry on, pick up and carry on. The hobbits are doughty.
Absolutely.
They just flat endure.
They do.
It sounds really Nienna-ish to me, if that's a word. Nienna-ish.
She brings strength to the spirit. Yep. Yeah. She brings strength to the spirit and turns sorrow to wisdom.
Yep.
Thank you. I really, I'm a person who's always looking for hope and aspiration. And so I've always really admired the character of Nienna. Yeah. And this, gives me something else to think about as I drive back and forth to work.
Good.
So, yeah.
Happy to have done
thinking
that,
is good.
Yeah,
thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks, Demay. Appreciate it.
If I can bring one more follow-up to that, because I'm finally reading ahead to the end of that paragraph, because I just read, she brings strength to the spirit and turns sorrow to wisdom. The last sentence of that paragraph in Valaquenta is, the windows of her house look outward from the walls of the world. So that's obviously very symbolic of hope, right? Because looking outward to what's beyond this world is the ultimate source of hope. Maybe that's why she didn't build as much in Arda itself.
That certainly explains it, yeah.
Maybe she is partly there to remind us that there is more.
I think so.
And that's a basis for that hope. I don't know.
I agree. I like that. Well, Shawn, I think we have time for one more. Arthur, what do you have for us? And if it's short, maybe we can still get to Bruce. Go ahead, Arthur.
This is short because it's a follow-up to the last thing.
Oh, okay. Oh, and what question are we not asking right now? I'm kidding.
I'll get back to you on that one.
Sounds good. All right.
Regarding Nienna, first of all,
Yes.
the two things. First of all, I don't have my Silmarillion in front of me, but I have some recollection that there was a throwaway comment about Olorin.
Yeah, I was going to get to that too.
Oh, yeah.
He spent time with Nienna and learned of her pity and compassion. And how important does that turn out to be?
Hugely, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. The line, you're right, it is a throwaway line. It's right at the very end. Wisest of the Mire was Olorin. He too dwelt in Lorien, but his ways took him often to the house of Nienna, and of her he learned pity and patience. Yeah, hugely important.
The other thing about Nienna, and this perhaps relates to your question about my unasked question, for those who have time, on Monday nights at Open Mic Night at the Café Valmar, she is in fact doing covers of Joni Mitchell and Janice Ian.
Of course she is. Oh my goodness. Oh, that is phenomenal. I love it. Thank you, Art. Oh, we need to have him on every Questions After Nightfall. All right. Bruce, looks like you're going to get the last question tonight. What do you have for us?
I have one that I hope that you will like very much.
I'm sure we will.
What makes you spend so very much time and energy sustaining the Prancing Pony podcast?
Oh, wow. Bruce, that's a great question. Thank you. Shawn, I guess I'd have to start by saying the community that has come up around it from the very beginning. We've had some amazing people that have been a part of this from very early on. Some people who encouraged us before it even existed.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's part of the motivation. And I think seeing the growth and realizing that we've reached so many people has made it a little easier for us to do that. I mean, I think if we go back to like early season 1, when we were lucky to get 200 or 300 downloads in an episode, over the first week or 2 weeks, we still wanted to do it because it was fun, because it helped us kind of rekindle our love for the books. And it was just a great experience. But at that point, we were, let's be honest, putting less effort into it because it wasn't what it is now.
Mm-hmm.
As for why we're doing that now, my goodness, everything from the community that's built up around it to being able to take part in these moots, being invited to be a part of these things, our fellowship of the podcast. I mean, really, that's the reason that's how we're able to.
Yeah.
Not necessarily why, though that certainly is an encouragement. But the fact is that without that support, we would never have been able to move to weekly. We wouldn't have been able to take part in these moots. We wouldn't have all the resources that we have to help make production a little bit better. Frankly, we spend a lot of money on books. So, I mean, why are we making more and more effort? Because we have more and more people who are a part of this and have invested in us, whether it's invested literally like on Patreon or just invested with their time and their support in social media and in sharing us and in commenting and being a part of the community. So, and of course we love it, but I think without that, we probably would be at early first season efforts still.
Yeah. I would co-sign everything you just said, Alan. I would say, for me personally, I have a lot of curious energy. I'm the kind of person who I'm always delving into something. I'm always trying to learn more about something.
Yeah.
And I would probably be spending a lot of that curious energy on learning more about Tolkien, even if I didn't have this podcast.
Right.
So the fact that we have the podcast gives me, first of all, an excuse kind of to spend as much time on it. Partly it's like, I would love to do this anyway, but if I didn't have a podcast, I wouldn't be able to justify spending so much time on it because I wouldn't really have anything to show for it,
Right.
Because we've got the podcast, we have something to show for it. And so that makes the effort more worthwhile than just spending that time and energy doing it myself. But I would say that, for me personally, over the last few years, as even before the podcast started, when I was just starting to get really involved in, sort of like the Facebook communities around Tolkien and things like that, I was enjoying the conversation so much and I was getting so much out of it.
Those book week posts, those were phenomenal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they were. They were wonderful. And I've made so many friends through that. And I have just learned so much through that, not just about Tolkien, but just also about other things that I'm interested in. And the podcast gives me an opportunity to give something back. And I really like that.
Yeah.
So
well, you're not kidding. It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I feel very grateful for the opportunity to give something back to this community,
I agree.
as opposed to just kind of sucking up all the knowledge. I enjoy being able to give a little bit of it back to people who listen to us and who,
I agree.
Who email us and things like that. So I think that's what it is for me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one of my highlights is when people talk about how I finally got through the Silmarillion thanks to your show, or, you really helped me view this passage in a new light. Those moments when people tell us that our work has benefited them in some way that's just hugely encouraging.
It feels wonderful.
It's heartwarming. Yeah, it really is. It really is. Man, those are some great questions, folks. Thank you so much. Great questions, great discussion. We really appreciate you joining us tonight for Questions After Nightfall, and we hope you can join us again for the next one. But until then, folks, please remember that the talk continues all night long at the Prancing Pony.
That's right. We've always got lots of discussion happening in our social media spaces. At our common room on Facebook, you'll find comments, questions, corrections, and more on every episode, as well as updates from us throughout the week. Just look for the Prancing Pony Podcast on Facebook and click the like and follow buttons.
You can also find us on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod and on Instagram at Prancing Pony Pod. Follow us wherever you happen to be. And if you like us, please share us on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or anywhere else you can find Tolkien fans.
And if you really want to let the world know your feelings about us, give us a review on iTunes. The more reviews we have, the more visible our podcast is. That helps others find us and this great community of Tolkien fans that we've built together.
And finally, if you'd like access to exclusive content like postscripts, quarterly specials, PPP swag, and more, check out patreon.com/prancingponypod to find out how you can join the fellowship of the podcast. And folks listening at home, we hope you will all join us again next week when we start our read-through of Book 2 with the first part of Chapter 1, Mini Meetings.
That's right, and we will get a chance to catch up with some old friends and find out a little bit more about what really happened at the Ford with all those white Mustangs.
Well,
like
folks,
that
as
one?
always, I like
that
that one. As a Mustang owner, I approve. As always, we want to thank all of you for listening, and a very special thank you to our patrons at the Kierdan's Contribution tier. That's DeMay in Alaska, James in Virginia, Tamsin in Minnesota, Emily in Texas, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Paul in Colorado, and Jerry in Texas. Thank you all so very much.
Make sure you don't miss a single episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Subscribe to the show through iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
And one last thing as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, and most of all, well, your best questions and corrections to the answers we've given today to Barliman at theprancingponypodcast.com.
Yeah, Barliman's not always punctual with the mail, but we will get back to you as soon as we can. And your question or comment may be featured on an upcoming show.
That's right. Well, folks, this has still been far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time,
farewell, friends.